Hey there, and welcome to the college recruiting information session. My name is Coach Bradley Thomas, and this information session is being recorded on January 5th, 2024. So we're just going to jump right into it and go over the agenda for the information session here. So part one is going to be what my background is in the sport as well as professionally. What exactly is college softball? Part two is going to cover what is the college softball recruiting pathway, and then what is the recruitment process like. Part three is going to be all about scholarships, both athletic and academic. Part four is going to be tips and tricks on how to make all this entire process a whole lot easier for you. So my background, my name is Coach Bradley Thomas. I coached collegiately with the University of British Columbia for 5 years. I've also coached minor softball locally in the Vancouver area of British Columbia, Canada. And I've been privately training softball players since 2018 with the organization True North Softball Association, of which I'm the managing director. I've also worked collegiately in athletics for 15 years in events, marketing, promotions, facilities, and operations. I've worked at the universities in their athletics departments of McGill University, UBC, as well as Simon Fraser University. There's a lot of confusion and misinformation out there about college softball, and I hope to bring some clarity so that you can use your time more efficiently throughout the whole recruiting process. This presentation only scratches the surface of what college softball is and all of the ins and the outs of the college softball recruiting process. And the information here is for information purposes only. And I strongly recommend that you also do your own research to supplement whatever is contained in this presentation. The background here. So in Canada, college softball isn't very well understood, as most notably, we historically haven't had too many options. Most people who coach or work as administrators within softball haven't played, coached, or worked in the college softball world, and due to a lack of coverage here on from the sports networks, there's not a lot of opportunities to even watch college softball. Thankfully, that is slowly changing now as there's more and more coverage, but we still have a long ways to go. The typical softball pathway for a Canadian softball player is when you start playing rep in minor at about grades 6 and 7, you play in what's called U13. Grades 8 and 9, it's U15. Grades 10 and 11, U17. Then you go on in grade 12, and maybe your first year of college, you play what is known as U19. And then for most players, that is the end of their softball playing career, and they hang up their cleats. Some play women's fast pitch or get into recreational slow pitch eventually. And for a very select handful of players, there's a junior national team and or the senior national team. As you can see, where is the end for most is a very big opportunity to play college softball, which is the whole basis of this presentation, to talk about what it is and how exactly everything works. What is college softball? So in its most simplest form, colleges and universities have softball teams that compete against each other. There are currently 1,661 schools that have softball teams. And as you can see, with that many schools and that many teams, there's no possible way that can all play each other in a given season. So that's why schools compete in different associations. And even within those associations, there are different levels. There are definitely differences between the levels within these associations, but there's also a lot of similarities as well. As a softball player at the college level, in its most simplest form, you do like every other student does, where you go to school, you attend classes, and you have exams. But the difference is that you train and you also play for the school's softball team, of which you generally have four years to play for that team, and then ultimately you graduate. So within the college softball world, there are a few different divisions and associations. There's the NCAA Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. There's NAIA, there's junior colleges, and there's a CCSA. We'll be going over a brief summary of every single one now. Now, the NCAA Division 1, there's 307 schools, and this is the home to the best of the best. The best players, the biggest budgets, the largest fan bases, TV time, etc. One thing to note is that only about 60 to 65 of these teams are truly big. So here's where we're talking about the Oklahoma, UCLA, Florida State, University of Washington, Michigan. Those are the big schools that we all know, but there's also about another 230 to 240 schools that are also playing at the Division I level, but we just don't get the exposure of. Within Canada and in British Columbia specifically, there is no local option for the NCAA Division I. At the Division II level, there's 275 schools, and here is where you get a lot of good, very solid teams and programs. There's a lot of parity across the level. The top flight teams within Division II, there's not that big of a gap between the best teams and the worst teams. Within Canada and the province of British Columbia, the local option is Simon Fraser University, where they play in the GNAC conference. Then we have Division III of the NCAA, where there's 406 schools. These schools are tend to be more focused on the academics. Some of these programs are very good competitively, but it falls off quickly with the majority of the programs at the Division III level due to the very high focus on the academics of most of these institutions. They also don't have an opportunity to give out athletic scholarships, which we'll be covering more in depth in part 3 of this presentation. The local option here, there are none. Then next we have the NAIA. There's 198 schools that play in the NAIA. The top end teams are extremely good. Many schools are a little bit smaller in size and or are faith-based institutions. The local option here in Canada and the province of BC is the University of British Columbia. Next, we have junior colleges, which are sometimes also known as JUCOs or JCs. These are 2-year schools with 2-year degrees. Some of these schools have very competitive softball teams where the top end teams are extremely good. Many of these schools also offer a pathway to 4-year schools like the NCAA Division I or Division II once you're done playing your 2 years with them. Due to the size of this level, where there's 474 schools, the low end can be pretty weak. Local option here in Canada and in BC is Douglas College, based out of New Westminster. Next, we have the CCSA. This is for Canadian schools only. The schools operate mainly in Western Canada and in Ontario. The season is short and they only play in the fall of September to October. The competition level varies. The high end is solid, but it's still not terribly great. Local options in the province of BC are UBC Okanagan and the University of Victoria. So how do these leagues ranked competitively? Now, I just have to give a bit of a background here, where for this chart, this is my own personal opinion based on my work experience and what I see when I watch teams play at these various competitive levels. So the top is the best of the best. That's the NCAA Division I. Next, we have the JUCOs, NCAA Division IIs, and the NAIAs. As you can see here, the top end for these programs is all reasonably the same, but where we see the major differences here is at the low end. And you can actually see that the top end junior college teams, in my opinion, are better than the NCAA Division II and the NAIA by a slight margin. But at the bottom end teams are actually worse than the NCAA Division II and your NAIA programs. Next, we have your NCAA Division III and your CCSA, and this is where you have a pretty noticeable drop-off in terms of the quality of play. So that is the end to part 1 of this presentation. Up next is part 2, where we're going to be covering the pathway as well as the recruitment process. So hope to join you then.